I mean, Jesus in the Bible certainly makes certain claims, right? That those claims are just not made by the sage. The only claim, if they were to make it, was that they are living according. I would believe that they would say, "I am living according to nature," and then they would explain their own nature, and they would explain the environmental facts and the facts of the world that they are able to understand, and which they are able to obtain through their network. But they'd be very careful with that, because they say that sages wouldn't necessarily have many friends, because basically they don't need them as such. Because especially if their friends are, say, the ones that are ignorant, right? They say, well, why would a sage have ignorant friends? Now, that's a very strong sort of line that the Stoics would take. I don't think it's necessarily helpful, but that's what Zeno says, like only the sages can be friends. Like everybody else is kind of like the ignorant masses. But then they say, okay, so the sages would lord over these people. They would rule over them. No. Why would it? The sage wouldn't need to do that. The sage says, well, why do I rule over these people? I don't feel the need to do that. I don't need to shout my credentials. Ruling over someone's an indifference. So it's a very sort of metaphorical. I feel like more metaphorically useful than really digging deep into Zeno's Republic to understand exactly. And we've only got fragments of it anyway to understand the exact nature of the sage. My personal guidance are: am I being just today? Am I being reasonable? So I had a really good example to give you. I don't know if you're aware, but on the Facebook group, my work was personally attacked. Right? Yeah. And the person meant extremely well. Actually, we agree. The funny thing is we actually agree, because we agree that environmentalism and Stoicism is not the same thing. Yeah. Right? But the way that it was said was like, okay, Kai, you've done this thing. You're dragging the environment into Stoicism. This is completely wrong. And got really, really annoyed about it. Yeah. So I decided to take a day. I took 24 hours to respond, because I thought, if I respond any sooner, I will be angry. Yeah. And if I'm angry, I will be unjust. And I've just written a piece like how to be stoic on social media. And so I had to sit and read my own advice and go, let me weigh this up. How do I be stoic on social media? And it was kind of like, okay, I asked myself, am I directly involved? Well, I was. I was directly involved. It was like my name was in it. There was a picture of me in it. It was like, it's Kai's fault. Everything's terrible.
Don't you hate it when you just write an article about how to be good on social media and then somebody attacks you? That's the
exactly. I was like, yeah. And I literally written it the week before, posted the week before, and I was told that I had hijacked Stoicism, which was very, could have been very painful if I hadn't took those 24 hours, because to say that I'd hijacked Stoicism would just be against everything I stand for as a human being. But I just decided not to act for 24 hours. I read the comments, I sat and pondered, I let the dust settle. And
I did notice that, because I saw that comment and I saw that you didn't reply immediately. I was like, where's Kai? What's going on? But go on.
But that was why. I was like, because if I am angry, if I respond in a negative way, I do many things. One, I don't do anything for my reputation, which is beyond my control anyway. But I don't enhance it by my own actions. Two, we actually agree. And I had to sort of fathom out, where do we agree and why do we agree and where is the misunderstanding? Three, I could have set off an atomic bomb, because it would have just become this vitriolic, abusive system. And I didn't want that, because I just didn't see that the sage would do that. Yeah. I think the sage, the way I see the sage, is the most harmonious person on the planet. They're in complete harmony with themselves. They know, for example, that they need to let the dust settle for at least 24 hours, or maybe they need it for an hour. I don't know. They're probably far more accelerated than I am. They know exactly what is needed to be done in their community. They're complete and it's very nice dynamic. I would say they're almost like a river flowing through and understanding, not particularly affected by the land, but affecting the land. So the river carves the land, but it's not necessarily, in the natural sense of the word, affected by the land as much as the river that is carving through. So,
and do you mean affecting people as well there? Like as in they indirectly affect people as they move through life? Or is it more, what do you mean by land?
So in a river, like the river cuts through the land, right? So as the river flows through, like very gently though, often very gently, it's over time. It cuts through. And someone gave an example, and I can't remember if it was Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, that says that we should, that our virtue should smell strong. So even if you didn't want to smell me, because I smell strong, you would anyway. I would make you notice me through my smell by just literally wandering through that path, taking that path. Because a sage would influence other people if those people are searching actively for virtue. And I fundamentally believe that the person who wrote that comment is desperately searching for virtue, who really understands the importance of the environmental message and is very deeply concerned that people could, taint Stoicism with a brush that is just not adequate for Stoicism at all. And that is a concern of mine. I think environmentalism can be a very negative thing and becomes a series of virtue signaling, right? Yeah. So we are in complete agreement. But if I don't frame that in the right way, what I do is I brush past people instead of saying, look, you just saw me getting attacked on social media. Not particularly badly, but very personally. I mean, they were very polite, it was very personal. Yeah. And then the response is, I don't know if you read my response yet, but the response of it was, wow, you weren't angry. You were not angry. Why were you not angry? Because I practiced Stoicism. And so this individual, I actually very grateful to, because they gave me the exact opportunity to prove, to use a Christian thing, to practice what I preach. Yeah. How hypocritical of me would it have been to go in there and get cross? I mean, if I'd have done that, I'm sure, as you know me relatively well, you'd say, that's not the Kai that talks on my podcast. Yeah. That's not the Kai that I want on the show, because he's not living up to the standards that he's put himself. And they're not as high as the sage, believe me. I'm sure I could have written it better. I'm sure there was a nicer way to say it. And I say nicer way in terms of a way that was more coherent with the Stoic message. I did my best. Yeah. So that was like how I said I would love to have a What Would the Sage Do? Because I think that we should all have them. Because you sit there and take a minute. The sage, remember that the sage would not necessarily have an opinion. So that's the 24 hours. Like, I can't have an opinion, because if I have one, it will be a forced one. Yeah. So it's like the sage will say, do I need to have an opinion? I don't need to have one. I mean, that's really weird, because, being a podcast host, you hear people's opinion all the time. But I've just discussed with you that one of the beautiful characteristics that I believe you have is the ability to play devil's advocate, the ability to be incredibly neutral. Now, I know in the past that you and I don't agree with certain things, but we've never made that an issue. And that is Stoicism. To be able to put it to one side and say, you know what, Kai, I don't agree with everything you say. Well, good, because I'm not the sage, so please don't. And please correct me. And please highlight me when, things are wrong. And, the other interesting thing is, like, in my progress to be a sage, and we discussed this before, I took John Peterson as a really good example of this, which is people find, people who know my work, how can you take some good quality from John Peterson? Well, why wouldn't I? Yeah. He taught me the art of saying, which I did say in my speech, I am very careful with my words. Yeah. I never said Stoicism and environmentalism the same. What I said was, if you believe that sustainability is fundamentally linked to courage, justice, self-control, and wisdom, then being unsustainable is the antithesis of virtue. Therefore, being sustainable is Stoic. Yeah. Now, if you don't agree with my premise, which you can definitely disagree with, and there are people that do, that's fine. That's not the same as environmentalism. And I only learned that through listening to Jordan Peterson. So even like in Stoicism, we can listen to people that we would fundamentally disagree on a lot of things and still see the really wise characteristic that person has. And I think Jordan Peterson is incredibly wise in that way. And that's something that I adopted.
Yeah.